So there we were earlier this month at the corner of Bathurst and Shepherd in North Toronto to cover the Walk with Israel event, a very family-friendly event. And of course, there was a very family-unfriendly event, a counter-demonstration by the pro-Hamas types at the same intersection. And folks, as we unpacked our gear, I couldn't help but notice a relic from the past, something strikingly familiar about this structure that right now looks like a burnt out shotgun shack. But alas, it turns out my suspicions were right, folks. This is indeed an ancient relic, aka a long defunct Fotomat outlet. Now, Fotomat was a chain of photo developing stores that began in the 1960s. By the 1980s, there were more than 4,000 of these drive-through outlets in North America. The concept was simple. You drove up to the window, handed the friendly attendant your rolls of film, and then returned a few days later to pick up the developed prints. Now, I get it. There are undoubtedly members of a certain generation, perhaps two generations, who just took in what I had to say right now and are still shaking their heads trying to make sense of it all. But here's the deal. Once upon a time, long before the emergence of the smartphone, photography was very much a physical thing as opposed to a digital exercise. Alas, the demise of Fotomat came via a 1-2 punch. Big box stores started to get into the photo finishing business, undercutting Fotomat's prices. But the biggest blow came via the digital camera revolution and the advent of the smartphone. No longer did consumers need a 35mm film camera and rolls of film to go in it, and having to visit a photo finishing shop. Everything was suddenly on a phone. Photography was easy peasy, and much like the once ubiquitous Blockbuster Video, the once mighty Fotomat faced its extinction event. Indeed, it's been decades since we happened upon a Fotomat shop, and even the sight of a long abandoned, severely dilapidated unit in a plaza parking lot brought back waves of nostalgia. Like leg warmers, fanny packs, and cassettes loaded with new wave music, a Fotomat shop is surely an icon of the 1980s. And you know, in a sense, given the state of the world today, this edifice made us long for what was perhaps the most iconic vehicle of the 1980s, namely a DeLorean DMC-12, preferably one equipped with the uber-rare flux capacitor option. Now, I wouldn't use the DeLorean to cruise the mean streets of Toronto, but rather go back in time some 40 years ago when life was unarguably more normal. We'd return to a period in which radical transgenderism was unheard of. Ronald Reagan was occupying the White House. Music was festooned with harmony and pleasant lyrics. And the idea of hooligans roaming the streets of the Western world chanting for genocide would be the stuff of some dystopian science fiction novel. Now, call me foolishly sentimental, folks, but I think I wouldn't mind to be parked back in the 1980s. I think the 1980s was a kinder, gentler time, and sure, we would have to give up such creature comforts as digital photography and the smartphone. But, you know, all things considered, I think I would make that trade in a heartbeat. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzies. Hey folks, I know you love it when Rebel News brings you the other side of the story, but the fact is, we do need your help. We don't receive any government funding, nor would we accept it if offered. So please go to rebelfieldreports.com. That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you're able to, kindly make a donation.